Buried for centuries, their voices refused to die.
Rome, the city of marble and blood. A place where emperors were gods, and gods behaved worse than men. In the heart of this empire, amid the echo of sandals and whispers of silk, there lived a woman whose name would outlive the men who ruled it. Her name was Valeria Messalina. To the public, she was the noble wife of Emperor Claudius. But to those who knew her closely, she was something else entirely, a storm in human form. A symbol of Rome's moral decay, dressed in gold and crowned with sin. The bloodline of ambition. Messalina was born around 17 AD into the distinguished gens Valeria, one of Rome's most ancient and influential families. Her lineage connected her directly to the very center of imperial power. Her cousin was the infamous Emperor Caligula, and through political bloodlines, she was tied to the Julio-Claudian dynasty itself. In Rome, blood was everything. It wasn't just about birth, it was about destiny. From the moment she opened her eyes, Messalina was destined to move among emperors. But she wasn't content to just walk beside them, she wanted to rule them. Her marriage to Tiberius Claudius Drusus, the future Emperor Claudius, was arranged when she was still a teenager. Claudius, older and scholarly, was viewed as weak and politically harmless. He stuttered, limped, and spent much of his youth hidden from the public eye. No one imagined this awkward man would ever sit upon the throne of Rome. Messalina did. She saw in Claudius not weakness, but opportunity. He would be her bridge to power, the accidental emperor. When Caligula, her cousin and the mad emperor, was assassinated in 41 AD, chaos erupted. Rome had seen assassinations before, but none as shocking. Caligula's reign had pushed the empire to madness, public executions, unpredictable decrees, and divine delusions. In the aftermath, the Praetorian Guard, Rome's elite imperial soldiers, discovered Claudius hiding behind a curtain in the palace. Terrified and trembling, he expected death. Instead, they saluted him. By dawn, Claudius was emperor. The scholars of Rome would later say he found the throne by accident, but Messalina knew better. For her, this accident was destiny unfolding. In that moment, she became Empress of Rome, the most powerful woman in the world. A hidden puppet master. Messalina quickly learned the art of imperial manipulation. While Claudius handled state affairs, often through advisors, she built her own empire within the palace walls. Her charm was her weapon, her beauty her army. She appointed allies, dismissed enemies, and whispered into the ears of generals and senators. Rome's nobility soon learned that to cross Messalina was to court ruin. Behind every decree of Claudius, wrote the historian Tacitus, there was often the hand of Messalina unseen. She didn't merely influence power, she controlled it. Men twice her age bent before her. Those who resisted met quiet deaths. Poison was a common language in the imperial household. The empire of pleasure. As her control expanded, so did her hunger, not for love, but for dominance. The feasts of the Palatine Hill became scenes of unspeakable extravagance. Silk curtains, rivers of wine, and the laughter of Rome's elite echoed late into the night. Messalina presided over it all, the golden empress of temptation. To the public, these were signs of Rome's prosperity. To the Senate, they were omens of moral decay. She learned that pleasure could be a form of politics. Men were easier to command when they were enthralled or addicted. Messalina's private gatherings became her court of influence. Every whisper, every glance, every indulgence was part of her strategy. And Claudius, the emperor, remained blind. He adored his young wife, believing her loyalty pure. But Rome whispered a different story. Enemies in the shadows. The Senate, long accustomed to power, watched in silent fear as Messalina's influence grew. She had allies within the Praetorian Guard, spies in every household, and servants who reported directly to her. Even the imperial freedmen, once loyal to Claudius, began to serve her interests. Her cruelty was quiet but absolute. Those who stood in her way vanished, sometimes through exile, sometimes through accidents. Senators who opposed her policies would wait to find their estates confiscated or their heirs accused of treason. Messalina knew Rome's greatest weapon wasn't the sword, it was rumor. She turned gossip into execution orders. She turned beauty into terror. The mask of innocence. Despite her growing infamy, Messalina maintained an image of perfect Roman virtue. She attended temples, gave alms, and appeared devoted to Claudius in public. To the people, she was the divine empress, elegant, charitable, and untouchable. But beneath that polished marble surface lay something darker. Messalina wasn't content with being adored. She wanted to be remembered, not as an empress, but as a goddess of Rome's decay. Her smile, one ancient account reads, it was the smile of Venus and the ambition of a serpent. Every statue, every ceremony, every triumph Claudius celebrated, Messalina was there, ensuring her presence was immortalized in stone and song. The empire in decline. By the middle of Claudius's reign, Rome's old virtues, discipline, honor, restraint, had eroded. Senators competed for favor not through service but through flattery. Generals sought pleasure over conquest. And at the center of it all, Messalina's court thrived like a garden of corruption. Some historians later called her the embodiment of Rome's downfall, a reflection of how power without morality consumes itself. She was not merely an empress, she was an era. And as her power grew, so did her enemies, silent, calculating, waiting. Rome had crowned its most dangerous woman. But power in Rome was never secure. In the shadows of her golden empire, jealousy and vengeance were already stirring. The flower of Rome's decadence was about to meet the steel of its judgment. Beneath the marble splendor of Rome's palaces, the empire's veins ran thick with secrets. Behind every toast to victory was a whispered betrayal. And behind every emperor's smile, a shadow waited. In that shadow stood Messalina, the woman who ruled the empire without wearing its crown. The empire of fear. By 43 AD, only 2 years into Claudius's reign, Rome had changed. The Senate bowed to a man they once mocked, an emperor who owed his survival not to his wisdom, but to the guards and to the woman who slept beside him. Messalina's network had grown vast. She placed spies in noble houses, informers among slaves, and assassins among entertainers. Rome was her theatre, and she its director. Her presence at court became more than ceremonial. She sat beside Claudius during meetings, her eyes studying every senator, memorizing faces and fears. When the emperor hesitated, she whispered guidance, subtle, poisonous, effective. The result was always the same. Her enemies fell, and her influence deepened. The fall of Julia Livilla. Messalina's first major target was Julia Livilla, the beautiful sister of Caligula and potential rival for influence. Livilla represented old imperial blood, dangerous blood, and her popularity among the Roman elite threatened Messalina's control. Using her spies, Messalina spread rumors that Julia Livilla had plotted treason. Within weeks, forged letters and whispered accusations reached Claudius. Claudius, ever insecure and easily swayed, ordered Livilla's exile to the island of Pandateria, the same island where imperial women had been sent to die in disgrace. There, she starved to death. Rome's chroniclers note, where Messalina's jealousy looked, death soon followed. Power through pleasure. Messalina understood something few others did. Power wasn't always seized through armies or decrees. It could be bought, promised, seduced. Her lavish banquets became recruitment grounds for influence. Senators who attended knew that every invitation was both an honor and a warning. Refuse, and risk her wrath. Attend, and become part of her silent network. Poets, artists, and nobles began to orbit her like planets around a deadly sun. Even generals returned from campaigns seeking her approval before reporting to Claudius. The emperor believed his reign stable. He didn't see that he ruled an empire within an empire, Messalina's empire, where every loyalty had a price. The return of Narcissus and Pallas. In the palace administration, Claudius's two trusted freedmen, Narcissus and Pallas, began to sense the growing corruption. Both were skilled political survivors, men who'd risen from servitude to become power brokers. Narcissus was sharp and cautious, Pallas, calm and calculating. They saw how the Empress's influence spread like smoke, invisible but suffocating. At first, they tolerated her, knowing her favor meant protection. But as her ambition deepened, they realized the empire itself was being consumed. They began quietly documenting her manipulations, a dangerous act that, if discovered, would cost them their lives. The destruction of Valerius Asiaticus. In 46 AD, Messalina faced her boldest challenge yet. A respected senator named Valerius Asiaticus had gained immense popularity. Wealthy, generous, and admired, he owned the gardens of Lucullus, one of the most magnificent estates in Rome. Messalina coveted it, not for its beauty, but for what it represented, a symbol of prestige she didn't yet possess. Using her old tactics, she whispered poison into Claudius's ear, that Asiaticus had mocked him in private and plotted rebellion with sympathetic senators. Claudius, fearful of conspiracy, ordered an inquiry. The result was preordained. Messalina called in her ally, the corrupt consul Suilius Rufus, to lead the prosecution. The charges were vague but damning: a treason, a sacrilege, a impiety. During the trial, Asiaticus defended himself with dignity. Even Claudius seemed uncertain. But before judgment could be rendered, Messalina secretly met with him. She offered him a way out, death before disgrace. The next morning, Asiaticus was found dead, forced to take his own life. Messalina took his gardens. She would later stroll through them as if walking on the bones of her enemies. The poison within the palace. As Messalina's greed grew, even her allies began to fear her. No one was safe, not senators, not courtiers, not even those who once served her faithfully. She had perfected the art of accusation. In Rome, to be accused of disloyalty to the emperor was death in slow motion. Messalina used this fear like currency, buying loyalty, selling silence. Yet with every secret victory, her paranoia deepened. She began replacing servants monthly, ordering random executions to test loyalty. Rome was a city of whispers, and Messalina had become its echo. The illusion of Claudius. Emperor Claudius remained blind, or perhaps chose to be. He was busy expanding the empire, famously conquering Britain in 43 AD, a triumph that filled the streets of Rome with celebration. As Claudius paraded through the city in golden armor, the crowd cheered his name. But historians later noted that the Empress followed just behind him, carrying her own smaller triumph, her beauty shimmering beneath the laurel wreath. Claudius conquered Britain, wrote Juvenal centuries later, but Messalina conquered Rome. The irony was sharp. While Claudius celebrated victories abroad, his empire was rotting at home, and it rotted from the top. The web of corruption. By 47 AD, Messalina's control over the empire was total. She influenced appointments, decided marriages, and commanded executions. The palace treasury served her whims. From jewels to estates, everything flowed toward her hands. But her greatest addiction wasn't luxury. It was power itself. Those who survived her ascent described her as driven by something unnatural, not just greed or lust, but an obsession with testing the limits of her influence. How far could she go before even Rome itself broke? The historians Tacitus and Suetonius both struggled to describe her madness without crossing into legend. Tacitus wrote, "It was as if the gods themselves desired to see how far the shame of Rome could go before the heavens intervened." The seeds of destruction. As Messalina's empire of indulgence flourished, small cracks began to appear. Her arrogance made her careless. She started targeting those who still had allies, and that would be her undoing. The most dangerous of these was Lucius Vitellius, an elder statesman who had survived the reigns of Tiberius, Caligula, and now Claudius. He knew Rome better than anyone. When Messalina attempted to seize one of his estates, Vitellius did not resist openly. He waited. He whispered to Narcissus and Pallas, warning them that their own lives would be next, and so, the alliance against her quietly formed, the first flicker of rebellion in a palace built on obedience. The empire had begun to choke on its own luxury. Messalina stood at the center of it all, radiant, untouchable, unafraid. But in Rome, every goddess eventually bleeds. And the whispers that once served her were beginning to turn against her. Rome had always been a city of power, and power, in Rome, was a kind of hunger. It fed on loyalty, on fear, and often on desire. Messalina, the empress who ruled behind the veil of her husband's name, had fed that hunger for years. But in the golden twilight of her reign, even she began to crave something more, not power over Rome, but over fate itself. The woman who could not be satisfied. By 47 AD, Messalina's name had become a whispered curse in Rome's marble corridors. To the people, she was untouchable, the divine wife of the emperor. To the Senate, she was the reason men disappeared. And to Claudius, she remained the perfect companion, loyal in public, charming in council, smiling as she devoured everything he had built. But the empire of fear she'd crafted began to lose its thrill. The enemies were defeated, the riches endless, the adoration constant. And for a woman whose existence revolved around the thrill of control, peace was the worst punishment of all. That's when she met Gaius Silius, the rise of Gaius Silius. Gaius Silius was no ordinary Roman. He was tall, ambitious, and dangerously handsome, a man of noble birth and impeccable charm. He had served as consul, led troops, and dazzled Rome's aristocracy with his confidence. Silius wasn't naive. He knew the power Messalina held, and the danger that came with it. But he also knew ambition when he saw it, and in Messalina's gaze, he recognized a reflection of his own. What began as flirtation soon turned into a conspiracy that would shake the Roman throne, the Forbidden Union. Ancient historians disagree on how it began. Some call it seduction, others say it was strategy. But all agree that Messalina and Silius formed a bond that defied reason and law alike. For an empress to pursue another man while her husband ruled as emperor was unthinkable, yet Messalina believed herself beyond consequence. At first, their meetings were discreet, secret dinners, hidden letters, servants bribed into silence. But the secrecy didn't last long. Rome's aristocracy thrived on gossip, and soon, every whisper in the forum carried her name. The empress and the consul, a people murmured. A union not of love, but of madness. The puppet emperor. Claudius remained unaware, or unwilling to see the truth. He was occupied with administrative reforms, trusting Messalina to manage domestic matters. She used this trust like a weapon. Through her influence, she ensured that Silius was granted increasing privileges, legal immunity, control over estates, and even access to imperial finances. Silius, meanwhile, began gathering allies within the Senate, men who despised Claudius but feared Messalina more. Behind the facade of imperial order, a second empire was forming, one that existed not in the marble halls of the Palatine, but in the shadows of desire and treachery. The marriage of madness. Then came the act that sealed Messalina's fate, a decision so audacious that even Rome, accustomed to scandal, stood in disbelief. While Claudius was away in Ostia overseeing grain supplies, Messalina and Silius did the unthinkable. They married, yes, the wife of the Emperor Claudius held a wedding ceremony with another man, in broad daylight, witnessed by Rome's elite. It was an open challenge to the gods, the laws, and the empire itself. Ancient chroniclers record that even those present were paralyzed with fear, unsure whether this was madness or the first step in a coup. Silius, intoxicated by her ambition, believed they could seize power together. Claudius was aging, weak, and unpopular. With the Praetorian Guard on their side, or so they thought, the throne could be theirs. The web begins to tear. But ambition, when it grows too large, devours its own. The wedding was no secret for long. Servants spoke. Courtiers whispered. And soon, the information reached Narcissus, Claudius's most loyal freedman, the man who had been quietly observing Messalina's every move. Narcissus was no fool. He knew that if Claudius discovered the truth from anyone else, the emperor might dismiss it as rumor. So he gathered witnesses, evidence, and testimony, and prepared to strike. He raced to Ostia, where Claudius was inspecting the harbor, and fell before him, trembling with urgency. "My emperor," he said, "your wife has married another man, and they plan to take your throne." Claudius, stunned, could barely form words. He laughed nervously, thinking it a jest. But when Narcissus handed him proof, documents signed by Silius, and reports from witnesses, the laughter died. The emperor's face turned pale. And in that moment, Claudius, the man history calls timid, became something else entirely, dangerous. The emperor returns. Claudius immediately ordered his guards to return to Rome. He said nothing to Messalina, nothing to the Senate. But his silence was more terrifying than rage. When word of his return reached the palace, panic erupted. Messalina's allies fled. Her servants vanished. Silius tried to muster his courage, urging her to stand firm, to seize power before Claudius arrived, but for the first time in her life, Messalina hesitated. The woman who had bent senators and generals to her will now trembled before the man she had once controlled. "The empire is ours," Silius insisted. "Claudius is weak. One word from you, and the guard will kneel." But Messalina knew better. The guard had never served her. They served whoever sat on the throne. And Claudius still wore the crown, the fall of Gaius Silius. When Claudius entered Rome, he said only one thing: "Bring them to me, alive or dead." The Praetorian Guard stormed the palace. Silius was found still dressed in his ceremonial robes, awaiting judgment. He did not plead. He did not resist. Knowing that mercy had no place in Rome, he demanded to die quickly. Before sunset, Gaius Silius was executed in the public courtyard, his body left as a warning to all who had worshipped ambition more than loyalty. The empire that had once whispered Messalina's name now spoke it in horror. The desperate Empress. Messalina fled the palace, barefoot and disheveled, seeking sanctuary in the gardens she had once stolen from Asiaticus. The irony was cruel. She hid among the very roses watered with the blood of her victims. From there, she sent desperate messages to Claudius. She begged forgiveness, pleaded for her life, promised repentance. She even sent their children, Britannicus and Octavia, to soften his heart. For a brief moment, Claudius hesitated. He was still the man who had loved her, the man who had trusted her above all others. But Narcissus, fearing the emperor's mercy, acted swiftly. He gave the command that Claudius could not. The execution. In the gardens of Lucullus, Messalina sat among the fading flowers, waiting for a reply that would never come. When the Praetorian tribune arrived, she understood. Her final words were never recorded, only that she hesitated to die by her own hand, forcing the tribune to strike the fatal blow. She was 23 years old. An Empress, a mother, a legend, and a warning. Rome buried her quietly, without ceremony, without honor. Her name was struck from monuments, her statues destroyed, her memory cursed. But memory is a strange thing. You can erase a name from marble, but not from the whispers of history. For as long as Rome stands, Messalina will live. Not as a queen, but as the shadow of its corruption. Rome had witnessed countless deaths, senators, generals, emperors, but none echoed through the marble halls like hers. Messalina was gone, yet her shadow lingered. The woman who had once ruled the heart of the empire left behind something more dangerous than scandal. She left behind silence. And in Rome, silence was never peace. It was the sound before another storm. The morning after her death. The morning after Messalina's execution, Rome awoke to confusion. No public announcement was made. No procession, no mourning, no decree. It was as if the Empress had never existed. The Senate waited for word from Claudius, but none came. The Praetorian Guard, ordered to keep quiet, burned all remaining letters and documents bearing her seal. Her name was erased from inscriptions, her portraits destroyed, her likeness removed from coins. Rome had seen damnatio memoriae before, the condemnation of memory, but never so swiftly, never so absolutely. It was as though Claudius himself was trying to convince the gods that he had never loved her. But love is not so easily buried. The emperor in mourning. Claudius withdrew from public life for weeks. He ate little, spoke less, and refused to meet the Senate. Even his freedmen, Narcissus, Pallas, and Callistus, tread carefully around him. The man who had once ruled with quiet diligence now sat in stunned disbelief. The betrayal had been personal, intimate, and public. He could not reconcile the woman he adored with the monster the empire had come to fear. He mourned her, wrote Tacitus, but not as an emperor. As a man who had loved and been deceived. At times, Claudius demanded to see her, forgetting she was dead. At others, he cursed her memory. Rome's chroniclers note that the emperor aged rapidly, his hair whitening, his gait slowing, his spirit dimming the cleaning of the palace. Meanwhile, Narcissus took control of palace affairs. He understood the danger that still lingered. Messalina had built her empire through fear and favor, and those webs didn't vanish overnight. Her allies still occupied key positions in the court and senate. Her servants knew too much. Her debts, bribes, and blackmail still hung over the empire like ghosts waiting to be fed. Narcissus began the purge quietly. Dozens of officials were dismissed, reassigned, or executed under vague charges. Properties seized by Messalina were reclaimed by the treasury. Her name became forbidden even in private conversation. To speak of her was treason. To remember her was foolish. And yet, everyone did. The fear in the Senate. The Senate, which had once trembled before her, now trembled for another reason. They had learned how fragile power was, how one woman's whisper could destroy an empire's order. In public, they celebrated her death. In private, they wondered who would rise next. For if Claudius could be deceived once, he could be deceived again. And in Rome, the throne was never empty for long. The children of the empire. In the midst of the chaos were two innocent victims, Britannicus and Octavia, the children of Messalina and Claudius. Britannicus, the emperor's only natural son, was still a child. He didn't understand the politics that surrounded him, only that his mother's name was now forbidden. Octavia, barely 10, was sheltered by palace attendants, her future uncertain. Claudius loved his children deeply, but his grief made him distant. He rarely saw them, leaving their upbringing to tutors and servants. The absence of a mother, the silence of a father, this was their inheritance. Ironically, the children of Messalina would become the victims of the same empire she had ruled through manipulation, the return of court intrigue. As Claudius withdrew, others filled the vacuum. Pallas and Narcissus competed for dominance, each controlling access to the emperor. Callistus handled military affairs, ensuring that the loyalty of the Praetorian Guard remained unshaken. But behind their rivalry loomed a growing question. Who would be the next empress? Rome was not kind to widowed emperors. The empire required the appearance of stability, and stability meant a family, an empress, a symbol of divine partnership. For the ambitious, this was opportunity. And in the corridors of power, another name began to surface: Agrippina the Younger. The arrival of Agrippina. Agrippina was everything Messalina had been, and everything she wasn't. She was cunning, cold, and controlled. A survivor of multiple reigns, niece of the late Emperor Tiberius, sister of Caligula, and mother of a boy named Lucius Domitius Ahenobarbus, the world would later know him as Nero. When Agrippina returned to court, she played her role carefully. She spoke with humility, dressed with restraint, and never flattered Claudius openly. Her intelligence was her weapon, her composure her armor. Narcissus, sensing her potential influence, warned Claudius to stay cautious. But Claudius, broken by betrayal, found comfort in her calmness. She seemed the opposite of Messalina, patient where Messalina was impulsive, silent where she had been loud, icy where she had burned like fire. And slowly, the emperor began to lean on her. Messalina's shadow. Yet even as Agrippina's power grew, she could not escape Messalina's shadow. The court whispered comparisons. Agrippina rules with her mind, they said, and Messalina ruled with her heart, or perhaps her hunger. Claudius avoided her name, but her presence haunted him. He once declared at a feast, in a moment of drunken melancholy, "No woman will ever again deceive me as she did." Agrippina smiled, offering him wine. But behind her calm gaze, she was already planning her own empire. The political resurrection. By 49 AD, Claudius officially married Agrippina, with the Senate's approval, though it was controversial. It was a union not of love, but of survival. Rome believed the emperor had finally found peace, that the ghost of Messalina had been laid to rest. They were wrong. Agrippina immediately began consolidating power, Just as Messalina once had, she elevated her own allies, silenced her critics, and ensured her son Nero was adopted by Claudius. Messalina's downfall had taught Agrippina one lesson: never make the same mistakes publicly. Where Messalina had flaunted her ambition, Agrippina cloaked hers in virtue. But the result was the same. The throne, once corrupted by passion, was now consumed by calculation. Claudius's final years. By 53 AD, Claudius was emperor in name only. His health declined, his decisions were controlled by Agrippina, and his son Britannicus lived under quiet threat. The emperor who had once been ruled by love was now ruled by fear. In his final days, Claudius reportedly muttered a haunting phrase: "I think I have married another Messalina." Soon after, he fell ill, poisoned, most likely, though the method remains debated. When he died in 54 AD, Agrippina's son Nero was proclaimed emperor. Britannicus, the true heir, was quietly eliminated a year later. And so, the prophecy fulfilled itself. The cycle of power, deceit, and death continued, just as Messalina had set it in motion. Messalina had died young, but her spirit never left the Palatine. Every empress that followed, Agrippina, Poppaea, even Nero's own, carried her reflection in their ambition. Rome had tried to erase her, but the empire itself had become her legacy. A world where beauty masked corruption, and where power was the ultimate seduction. The silence after her death was not peace. It was the echo of her reign. There are moments in history when silence becomes louder than war. Rome, once the eternal city of gods, now whispered a single name in fear: Messalina. The woman who had ruled emperors, destroyed nobles, and bent the Senate to her will, was about to face her reckoning. The day the gods turned away. By 48 AD, Rome had begun to turn cold toward its empress. The senators who once bowed now whispered. The generals who once courted her favor now avoided her gaze. And in the palace halls, the name Messalina carried the same weight as a curse. But Messalina did not see the danger. Her vanity had grown into blindness. Her enemies, Narcissus, Pallas, and Vitellius, waited like wolves for a single mistake. And then she made it. The forbidden marriage. While Claudius was away in Ostia overseeing grain shipments, Messalina's obsession with the handsome noble Gaius Silius reached its peak. Her power, her beauty, and her lust for dominance collided into madness. She did what no Roman woman, no empress, had ever dared to do. Messalina married Silius. Not in secret, not in whispers, but in a full, public ceremony within the city of Rome. Priests were called, witnesses gathered. The union was sealed with sacrifice and wine. And all while the emperor still lived. To Rome, it was treason. To her enemies, it was the opportunity they had prayed for. Tacitus writes, "It was not lust that destroyed her, it was the madness of believing she could not be destroyed." The conspiracy breaks. When word reached Claudius, he was dining. Narcissus was by his side, as always, quiet, observant, and waiting. A messenger burst in, pale and trembling, delivering the impossible news. The Empress has married Silius. The people watched. The Senate whispers. The gods are mocked. Claudius froze. For a moment, disbelief shielded him. He asked, "Am my wife married?" Then, realization struck, and with it, fury. Narcissus seized the moment that he knew hesitation could save Messalina again. So he pressed forward, ordering guards, seizing control of the Praetorian command. By the time Claudius gathered himself, Narcissus had already begun the purge. The flight of Messalina. News of the Emperor's wrath reached Messalina while she was feasting in Silius's garden, the same gardens of Lucullus she had stolen years before from Valerius Asiaticus. Irony, bitter and poetic. The music stopped. The laughter died. Messalina's face turned pale as servants whispered that the guards were coming. Silius begged her to flee, but she hesitated, still clinging to the illusion of her invincibility. When the soldiers arrived, Silius was dragged away, screaming that he had been deceived. Within hours, he was executed. Messalina fled the palace, barefoot and desperate, seeking help from her mother, Domitia Lepida. She begged for mercy, for one last audience with Claudius. Her mother wept, not for her daughter's sins, but for knowing how Rome punished those who flew too close to its throne. The Emperor's judgment. Claudius returned to Rome in silence. His eyes were hollow, his voice drained. He sat in the imperial chamber surrounded by his advisors, Narcissus, Pallas, and Vitellius. They read aloud the list of Messalina's crimes. The betrayal, the mockery of his rule, the marriage to another man while still his wife. The Emperor's heart broke quietly. He whispered, "Let her be heard." But Narcissus feared that Claudius's weakness would once again spare her. So he acted first. Without waiting for the Emperor's consent, he sent soldiers to the gardens of Lucullus, where Messalina hid among the statues and roses that once symbolized her glory. The end of the Empress. When the guards arrived, they found her seated under a cypress tree, her hair disheveled, her jewels discarded. The woman who had once ruled Rome with beauty and terror was now a ghost of herself. A centurion handed her a dagger, as was the Roman custom, to die by her own hand and preserve a shred of honor. Messalina trembled. She tried once, but her courage failed. In the end, it was the centurion who finished it. When Narcissus heard the news, he merely nodded. Then, returning to Claudius, he announced, "It is done." The Emperor asked no questions. He simply said, "Bring me wine." Aftermath, the silence of Rome. Messalina's body was buried in secret. No public mourning, no grand pyre, no marble tomb. The name that had once ruled every whisper was erased from official records. The Senate moved on quickly, as Rome always did. Claudius remarried within the year, to Agrippina the Younger, mother of Nero. Another ambitious woman, and another tragedy waiting to be written. Yet for years, citizens still spoke of Messalina in the dark. Some called her monster, others victim. Some claimed her ghost still wandered the garden she once owned, forever searching for the love that destroyed her. Tacitus ended his account with chilling simplicity. Messalina perished, and Rome breathed again. Legacy: the woman Rome tried to forget. Centuries later, historians would argue over who she truly was. Was Messalina a manipulative seductress who corrupted an empire? Or was she a product of Rome's decaying morals, a mirror reflecting its own rot? Her story became a symbol of beauty turned to power, of desire turned to madness, of a city that devoured its own gods. Every empire has its Messalina, a figure who embodies the sins it tries to hide. And every time her name is whispered, it reminds us that power, once unchecked, always consumes its wielder. The marble of Rome still gleams under the same sun that once watched her fall. The gardens where she laughed are silent now. But in the memory of history, her shadow remains. Not as a lesson in morality, but as a warning to those who believe desire and power can ever be tamed. For the empire may have forgotten her name, but history never forgets the price of forbidden power.